We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today's episode kicks off our next Paring Down mini-series. I've explained this, I think, a couple times before because we did Paring Down the holidays a couple months ago. But every once in a while, I'm going to do a couple weeks where we focus on a different area of life and how to pare it all down. And it'll often relate back to decluttering, but just paring down in general, things that are important to us because we want to get intentional about the way we live our lives. And that means paring down what we think and believe and value about a myriad of different subjects. So with Valentine's Day right around the corner, I wanted to do a mini series called Paring Down Relationships. Today's episode is going to be one of the ones that I know I'm constantly sending people in my DMs being like, just listen to this episode because it's about the number one question that I get, which is, how do I declutter if my partner is not on board and doesn't want to get rid of their stuff too? So I cannot believe I'm telling you this, but guess who I have on the podcast today? None other than world-renowned couples therapist and psychologist, Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. I am so deeply honored. I barely have words to describe to you what it feels like to have her on the podcast. Not only is she the best at what she does and works with the biggest names in relationships and parenting and mental health, like think Dr. Becky and Dr. Shafali. I mean, Tracy is who you go to when you want to better your relationship. So not only is that who she is, she also just happens to be a personal mentor and someone I adore personally and professionally, as I've been able to work with her on her team for the last year or so. And she is just as thoughtful, wise, relatable, down to earth, brilliant in person in a real life relationship with her as she is online and her giant community on Instagram and her online courses. I mean, she's just every bit as authentic as you would hope for a therapist to be. And so it's truly my honor to have her on today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her. She has her PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Ottawa. She is the owner of Integrated Wellness, a mental health clinic in Ottawa. So she's still a practicing clinician for couples therapy. She's extensively trained for almost 20 years in emotion-focused therapy, EFT. She is the creator of Be Connected Digital, which is her online program for couples or individuals looking to better their communication and their relationship as a whole without going to traditional couples therapy. It's such a cool resource. I highly recommend looking into it. She is also the podcast host of her highly rated podcast, I'm Not Your Shrink. Another great resource. You can find her work in academic books, in multiple peer-reviewed journal articles, and of course in her book, I Didn't Sign Up for This, which came out just this past fall, actually. It's called I Didn't Sign Up for This. A couples therapist shares real-life stories of breaking patterns and finding joy in relationships, including her own. I think that's what makes Tracy really special is she not only shares her clinical knowledge with the world, but she also shares her personal experiences in her own marriage. And that really brings a lot of relatability and trust to what she says because of her empathetic nature. So for today's episode, not only are we going to be diving into those relationship dynamics that show up when we're trying to declutter our home, but I also just wanted to ask Dr. Tracy, what is the most important thing or things when it comes to our relationships? Really paring down what matters with the person that we love, what matters to focus on. How do we make sure that our relationship is healthy and strong and long lasting? Oh, and real quick, I just felt like I needed to say this. There was a slight delay when Tracy and I were talking, and it resulted in sounding almost like I'm interrupting her whenever she finishes a thought. And I could not let this episode release where it sounds like I'm interrupting a world renowned psychologist. Like, I do not think that highly of myself that I would do such a thing. And I just needed to put it out there that I promise if it sounds like I am jumping onto everything she is saying or ignoring something that she is saying in the middle of my thought, it's just the delay made it so that there is absolutely no space between what I hear her say and then my response to her. So anyway, I'm just giving that disclaimer because it was embarrassing me. Okay, all right, let's do this for real, for real. We're diving into the conversation with the one and only Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. Tracy, I cannot believe you're on today. I feel like a superstar, basically, for having you here. I am so honored and so grateful for you to come on. For anyone who doesn't know you, which I'm pretty sure most people do, but if they don't, would you tell the people who you are and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. And also, let me just start by saying I'm so thrilled to be able to sit with you as well, because I'm a huge fan of your podcast and you are impacting my life more than you know right now. So I just always need to start there. So thank you for you giving your time to us, to sharing your expertise with us. You really are making an impact. And as a fellow podcaster, I know that sitting in this end where we don't get to hear from people. It feels like a solo mission, and there's so much behind the work scenes of a podcast that people don't see it. And so sometimes when you don't hear that from others, there are these moments where it's like, what's the point? Anyways, I don't know if you've
Yeah,
had that.
1,000%. So thank you
Okay.
so much. That makes me really
Yeah.
happy.
Yes. Yeah. I'm Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. I'm a psychologist and couples therapist. I'm all the way up in Ottawa. We are expecting a big snowstorm. So I'm thrilled to be having today's storm come in finally. But I have two children, and I started my work outside of my office in the depths of a Canadian winter while nursing my second daughter. I remember sitting in the basement and thinking, and just a sense of not being satisfied with the discourse around relationships on social media and in the media at large. And I know what a privilege it is to go and see a therapist and to sit in a therapy room, because it means that it's accessible to you. It means you have time to get there. It means that someone's available to you. And I know that not everybody is able to do that. So I started with my values, which was to be able to reach more people outside of my therapy room. And that was back in 2018. So, here I am several years later, being able to say that I'm reaching people all over the world, teaching them what it means to live a meaningful life and to build better relationships with themselves and with the people that they love.
It's amazing that you've made it so accessible, and I know you just had your book release this past fall, which did incredibly well. And you were just offering resource after resource after resource. And I'm just so grateful that you do that for us because, like you said, not a lot of people have access to a therapist, especially a couples therapist. I feel like there's this idea that your partner has to be on board also to go to couples therapy,
Right.
which I'm sure is true and untrue at the same time. And so, and it's kind of more of a taboo subject. People don't like they'll talk about their kids day and night, but talking about the struggles in their relationship,
Yes.
it's harder for people to do that. So you offer this to people in a gentle way that feels less overwhelming for them as they start their journey towards a healthier relationship. So that's awesome.
And I think there's an important piece in there as well, which a lot of the work I end up doing is individual therapy for relationship problems. And it's one of the reasons why I created Be Connected, my online program, because I wanted to teach people, how can you communicate? How can you break through cycles in your relationships? How can you feel more connected even when your partner is not on board? And you can. And I'm seeing hundreds of people do this work even when your partner doesn't want to go to therapy or doesn't see that there's a problem. If you feel like something isn't working, then you can start changing things within yourself. And it's quite powerful.
Yeah, that offers so much hope because I think a lot of times we lose that hope when we're like, well, my partner isn't willing to grow or change or learn, and so nothing's going to change. But to know that that is an individual there's autonomy and ability within us as individuals to do that is really hopeful. And what's funny is one of the number one questions that I get in my DMs or in person is like, I want to declutter. I want my house to feel more peaceful, but my partner is not on board. Like, they don't want to get rid of their stuff. And whenever someone asks me that, I call upon a lot of what you teach, but I also let them know that's a relationship question, not a decluttering question,
Mm-hmm.
because those dynamics are so tricky, and there's so much communication involved, and there's so many personalities involved, and it's really quite difficult. So that's why I'm excited to have you on today, not only to pare down what is actually important within a relationship for longevity and satisfaction. And I know we'll get into that, but I'd love to start with this decluttering piece because it is such a common problem in my community. So, just kind of high level, what would you suggest to someone who comes to you and says, I want to declutter, but my partner isn't on board? What do you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious how the onboarding has actually gone. Oftentimes, we spend a lot of time thinking about something and making a decision all within our own minds without talking through the process with our partners or asking questions. This is the same experience as we see even with conscious parenting, is that we come in and saying, we're doing this, and our partner is still back at the base of the mountain and you've already climbed halfway up. Instead of being able to talk about feelings and thoughts of the state of things, of the state of your relationship, of the state of the house, of the clutter, and understanding where you're both starting. And so when we go to our partners and say, I'm decluttering, I'm getting rid of the stuff, that pile over there, you need to go through it, a natural human behavior is resistance to being told to doing something. It's called psychological reactance. The research, it's old research, but it shows that you tell a group of grade eighters not to get this book from the library, and they all go and get the book. The majority of them get the book because we do the opposite of what we are told. So if you go to your partner, and I call it top down, this is the top down approach. We say, we are decluttering the house, we're paring down, we're getting rid of all the things. Their natural reaction is going to be one of resistance. But the bottom up approach is more like seed planting, which is talking about where you're at right now, how you feel about things, what's important about your space in your home. How do you feel when you walk into our bedroom and there's all of these things on our dresser and nightstand and floor? How might it feel if we approach this differently? How do you feel about all of these things in the kitchen and the glassware and all of the things? So I think oftentimes we come in top down when we need to come in bottom up.
Wow. That was really valuable. There's so much there's a lot of curiosity in those questions, is what I'm hearing, is asking to learn about them instead of to control their behaviors. I feel like there's a
Hmm.
difference when I ask my husband with those
Mm-hmm.
two different intents, which is like, he will tend to recognize when I'm being condescending if I'm asking him questions that the goal is to control versus to learn about him. I mean, our
Right.
husbands or wives or partners, they're not dumb. They'll know what we're trying to get at, you know? So to like
Yes, of
have that
course.
intent is awesome. And so when our partner inevitably probably gets defensive, where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think for defensiveness, you can recognize it. What we tend to do is we tend to up the ante. Defensiveness breeds for more criticism or defensiveness back. And this is where I talk at extents of, that's not even a word there, I'm making that up, but this is my extensive conversations with my community, which is, what are those negative cycles we get stuck in? And that is, we try to find the bad guy, or we get into a blame defend cycle, or we then just don't bring things up at all. And so if our partners do come in with defensiveness, which is common, there are all kinds of different ways we can reply to it, which is first calling it out in a very loving and gentle way, not a stop being so defensive, but in a way of, gosh, what's happening right now? I brought this up and it sounds like you're getting defensive. So labeling it can be a really good one to kind of step out of it. You might also say, what did you hear me just say right now? And if they say, oh, it sounds like I'm not doing anything right, you might say, okay, that wasn't my intention behind that, but let's go into it a little bit more. But the idea, though, is to recognize that their reaction is to a perceived attack. So whether you are attacking them or not, it's important to understand that and then to go back into okay, how can we do this differently so that we can understand each other a little bit better?
That makes so much sense. Something that helped Aaron and me, and we're going to be doing a podcast too about our experience with
I can't wait to
yeah, with
listen.
decluttering as a couple, because we're very different. I am, get rid of everything, and he's got the clutches on, and it's been a growth journey for him and for me, for both of us. But one of the things that really helped was me asking, do you feel like I'm accusing you of something right now? Or like, am I attacking you? Because when I
Oh,
would ask him, like, hey, are you feeling defensive? Then he's defensive about his defensiveness. And he feels like I'm still putting it on
right.
him that he's the one getting defensive. But when I say, like, do you feel like I'm attacking you? Do you feel like I'm accusing you? It allows him to like step back, and I don't know. It just has worked really well for us. So that makes total sense. Like you said, it's a response to feeling attacked. And similarly along those lines, uh, I think we want to avoid that conversation where we feel like someone's going to get defensive or there's no point or whatever. And so then we're like, I'm just going to declutter their stuff myself, right? Can you speak on that? Like,
Right.
why that's probably just not a great approach?
When you say that, I think of my own experiences growing up and how important it was for me to have my own space, and actually how important it is for all of us to have our own space. And so even the thought of and I tell this story in my community all the time, if my husband is using my soap in the shower, it is a no-go for me. But for him, he doesn't have the attachment to soap. For me, it reminds me of how my items were not respected as the youngest in the family and wanting my own space, which kind of comes back to, why do our partners get defensive or resist this as well? It often goes into that core feeling of power. Power exists in our relationship. It's something so small like, are we having pizza or tacos for dinner? Or something bigger like, are we having another child or not? And when it comes to then our belongings, do I get to have that sense of freedom and choice over something that is mine? And we all need to have that in some way. So I don't recommend you getting rid of your partner's items because you don't know what they mean to them. Like what that thing, like what's the story behind that thing? How is that important? Now, when I say that, you and I have stories of our own husbands, and I have been working on this 5-disc CD player that is in my husband's closet, and it magically went back there after a basement renovation. We're working on it. But I know you have
Well,
a
did you?
story as
I'm
well.
curious. Okay, so you had taken this CD player out when you renovated,
Yes.
thinking it's finally out.
Right.
We're going to actually get this thing out of the house because it's out of the closet in the basement. And then it went back into the closet in the basement. Did you ever find out like what his attachment to it is?
Not yet. And likely because I've been showing up as very human and not as my couples therapist self at home, and reminding him that his grandmother is not in the CD player, which is not so for people listening, we lost my husband's grandmother at the beginning of COVID. She lived a beautiful life, has 13 grandchildren and so many more great grandchildren. And we received a few items of hers. And so the speakers were quite large, and my husband already let go of the speakers. And I wasn't aware that the disc changer, the actual CD player, was still there. We have pared down our CDs many times. We have not played a CD in I don't know how long. And so when we were renovating the basement, we had a flood in the summer. And so we had to put everything away and then bring it all back and organize. And I didn't know where it landed. And then it's back there. And so I've let it sit for now because it's not something that I need to address. But I know when he's ready, he'll let
So
go of
it's the
it.
grandmother sentimentality piece.
There's a holding on to
Yeah,
that.
that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah. There's something else in there. I haven't gotten there yet, but I want to hear your
Yeah.
story.
So, it's interesting because that's probably even trickier than my story, because my story involves something that is in use. I think it's harder when we see things that are not in use of our partners and we're like, why? At least with my story, it's in use, but it is ridiculous. So, um I have all matching towels in our bathroom, and I was paring down our towel collection, and there's this one like hideously ugly towel. I know I sent you a picture of it because it's worthy of a picture. It's so ugly. It's like dark brown and purple, and I'm like, striped. I don't even understand it. And my husband would use it all the time. And I
For what? Like for his
for
body?
his body, Tracy. Like,
Oh, it's his body towel.
yes. I was like,
Not even like a hand or a
no,
hair.
like
It's
fully hanging on a hook. Like, it was a lot. And so I finally was like, why? I'd put it in a donate pile, and I did luckily say, hey, these are the towels I want to get rid of. Like, do you have any thoughts? And he was immediately like horrified that this towel was in there. And I was like, why do you use this so much? I don't get it. And I was shocked that he hadn't told me this before, but this was a towel that his grandmother had given him. They were roommates when he was in grad school. So he lived with her, and funny enough, she gave it to him because it's so ugly. She was like, I don't want this thing. You should take it. And so it speaks to his grandmother's humor, and it just reminds him of her. And we also lost her at the beginning of COVID. And so to him, it is a direct link to his grandmother. And so for me, it's made it a lot easier to keep that fine, but he also does use it
and to
he
understand
uses it a lot. So as much as it annoys me in terms of visual, I don't know, it's just not cute. I'm at least glad it's in use. I think the CD player would probably be a harder one for me. I don't blame you. That's tough when it's not in use. I'd be like, okay, well then you can use it during your workouts. Choose a CD as long as it's in use.
It's not even plugged in. It's not even plugged in.
Oh,
That's not even. I don't even know if the cord is. But and I think the other thing too is we all have attachments to something in some way, whether it's a memory, whether it's an object, or a thing we like to do. And what I like about your experience, Shannon, and your story is that it's that reminder that it's not for us to judge or to decide, but rather to appreciate that. And this is the truth of relationships, which is you are two different people. You will never view the world in the same way, and you're not supposed to, because what actually brought you together are your differences and the things that were exciting to you. And so being able to remember those parts of each other rather than focusing on the parts where you're not the same or you're arguing, right? Like focus on the fact that you can learn from each other. And that's a beautiful thing in a relationship.
yes, 100%. It's honestly one of the reasons that I do feel like Aaron and I are in a great spot. Doesn't mean that our relationship is easy, but we're 8 years in, and something I do feel like we've been able to do pretty well is remember that the negative things we don't like about each other are very closely attached to the things we love about each other. So,
Mm-hmm.
I can fly off the handle. I am spicy. I am, I can speak a million miles a minute, as everyone who has heard my podcast knows. and, um, and so I can be a little bit impatient and all of those things. And when I apologize to Aaron, one of the things he says to me over and over again is, that's part of why I love you, because if you weren't that way, you wouldn't be so creative. You wouldn't be so empathetic and good at communicating. Like, he starts naming these things off, and I feel so fortunate. And in the same way, like with him holding on to things and it drives me a little crazy, it reminds me how much I love him because he has a zest for life. So I am a very grounded person. I'm very realistic. I'm like, better. I'm just not very fun by nature. I'm adventurous, but I'm also like boring, right? Like, I don't heat me up a frozen meal. I'm good. And meanwhile, he's like,
You're
I
practical.
practical is the word. Thank you. He is like, give me a 7-course meal. I want every costume possibility for a costume party in the future. I need to keep that. I need to keep this disco ball. Like, he's a fun person. And that is so much of why I love him, is that happy-go-lucky nature, because it balances me out. So I appreciate you talking about that differentiation, which I know we'll get into more of in a little bit too. And I would like to know this is a big can of worms about to open, just warning you. There's no way we can cover what I'm about to ask in this podcast, but a UCLA study that is pretty popular in the minimalist and decluttering community has found that there's a direct correlation between the amount of things we own and stress hormones, cortisol levels, particularly in
Mm-hmm.
women. The more we have, the more cortisol is in our system. First of all, why do you think that is? Why do you think the stuff in our homes affects women so deeply?
Mm. I go to the idea that women are the caregivers and the nurturers in the family, and that we hold the due to socialization, due to our culture, due to gender norms, is that we hold the weight of the mental load. And so when we see something, it's not just that there is a glass on the table, it represents how much milk we have in the fridge. And when's the next time we're getting groceries? And then does my little guy need more of whatever from the And so it's just this constant running laundry list in our minds that we hold. And so we think of how our nervous systems respond, which is we are constantly receiving messages from our environment, but also inside of ourselves and then between us, right? So inside it are the thoughts and feelings I have. So my thought right here is, oh, my tummy's a little bit hungry. What am I having for lunch? That's a cue to my nervous system. Between you and I, you're nodding your head. That's a cue to my nervous system. Outside in the world, I'm seeing this snowplow outside reminding me of the storm. That's a cue to my nervous system. All of these things in our homes become cues. And so is my body then in a state of constant fight or flight? Or because I've been in such a state of fight and flight for so long, it then goes to shut down, which both of those distress states are increasing cortisol in our body. So we are constantly responding to everything around us. And yes, then we're like, okay, where's the solutions? I've got to do things. It's like I'm constantly in this state of stress. I have to go, I have to do, I need to protect my family. If we think of the fight or flight. So yeah, we experience more cortisol. And yet, gosh, that is, even just thinking of it, it's exhausting of all of these things. And it's not helping us. It's not helping us feel good within ourselves, feel good within our families or in our relationships.
Right, because then that resentment piece pops in. Why don't they see it? Why don't they understand that all this stuff sitting around is so stressful? Like, why? And so actually I'm going to ask you, I'm
Right.
not going to make that rhetorical. Why do, generally speaking, of course this is not across
Mm.
the board, but generally speaking, I would say men, why do they struggle to understand the importance of decluttering or keeping a tidy home? Like, it feels like they just don't even see the mess.
Whew, we're going all day today. Um, I have a few theories. So one, again, think of even just who we are in different sexes. And I gave my children equal chances to be in the kitchen with me and to bake with me, to play with dolls and cars. For those listening, I have a son first and then my daughter. So it was really cool to watch my son come into the world, into what socialization looks like, connection with family members, and then to watch my daughter come in. And just for who they are. And again, this is, I see this in many children and also the stories of my clients and how they've grown up as men or women, which is that my daughter, was in the kitchen with me much more. She was more curious about this stuff, not because she had more opportunities, but that was part of who she is. And is that part of sex? Yes, absolutely. But then on top of it, then comes our socialization. So are we harder on women when we're raising our little girls? Maybe. Do we have this like implicit belief? We can look in previous generations that yes, previous generations, girls were taught to do more of the cleaning and the cooking and the tidying and the nurturing, which is why we've got this massive problem with the invisible labor and the amount of work that women are doing every single week. 90 hours of work is what the research shows, of visible and invisible paid and unpaid labor, which is wild. So I believe that there is a huge piece of that. And then I also think of, okay, well, what about how we approach the world? And part of me wonders if part of an adaptive strategy for men is that they shut some of this stuff down and they compartmentalize. In relationships, I see more compartmentalization in men. I'm speaking in broad terms, so not everybody, but in broad terms, from what I see in my therapy room, more men compartmentalize. And so I think by using that strategy regularly, it leads them to not necessarily see all of the other parts of the puzzle. They only see the one part. So, oh, I'm in work mode. I'm not thinking about my child's soccer game tonight because I'm in work mode. And then when I'm driving home, I'm in driving home mode. And then when I get home, I don't think to tell you about what happened at work or my little one's soccer game, because now I'm in eating dinner mode or transitioning or whatever that is. So I think there's a use of compartmentalization that leads men to not see this stuff. Socialization, culture, coping strategies.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And it plays out in my relationship for sure. You know, Aaron gets home from work, and I'm grateful he actually is the cook in our family. But his dad was the cook, right? So there is that socialization within the family of what is the
Right.
norm. Because who likes cleaning? My daughter. She says, "Give me the cleaning solution." She wants to rub down all the tables. Who does the cleaning in the house? I do. Who likes to cook in the
Right.
kitchen? He wants to make all the pancakes. My son. Because who does that? His dad. And it's so
Right.
interesting how they start to cling on to those gender roles so young. Even when I invite Anderson to clean, Aaron invites Josephine to cook, and
Yep.
they really follow example more than they follow invitation, even, which is interesting. So I
Mm-hmm.
can see that by adulthood, men, whatever they have seen and by example is what they're going to do. And so they like, it's actually kind of comforting what you just said is that they actually don't see it. They're not just seeing it and ignoring it to be a pain in the butt. Like it's not active weaponized incompetence. Maybe sometimes it is, but like a lot of times it's they
Sometimes.
genuinely like don't recognize it. And it doesn't mean that it's an excuse, right? Like so I guess the next question is then how do we help them move forward? Because I don't want to be condescending and be like, well, you just don't see it and I need to help you see it. Like it's how do we help them though understand the mental load?
Right. Which is about systems. So of course I always recommend Fair Play, Eve Rotsky's great system. It works for many people. It's a great system to use. It's not for everybody, but it's something to explore. But it really is about the system in your family. So you might, and also too, Shannon, if we even back up, did you and Aaron have the conversation? I know your earlier time before you got married is shorter than many others, but but that did you have the conversation of what system are we going to put in place for us to pare down? What system will we use to keep our house from getting cluttered? What system are we going to use to clean the house? Will you be mopping and I'll be doing bathrooms? Will you do kitchen and I? We often don't talk about these roles that we want to play and even how we'll get there. I remember one of my friends, they had this printed out. It was a laminated piece of paper, weekly tasks, bi-weekly tasks, monthly tasks, yearly tasks, and you could check it off. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. That's so organized. That's totally not me. I don't want to do it. And then years later, Greg and I are like, yeah, we need one of those lists, right? But most people think they should just be able to do this, and we can't. So instead of then, and then Shannon, this is what I often see is we get stuck in these negative communication cycles where then we're not communicating about things. We are then having the same repeating fight over and over again, whether it's about connection, in-laws, sex, baby, cleaning, purging, all of those things. When really it comes to this, okay, what are we doing to close the house? What's the thing? What are those 5 things we have to do every single night to close the house? And I actually said this to my husband one day. Is that we've gotten into this pattern where we're both lying in bed. I'm about to close my eyes, and I'm like, "Did you lock the car?" He drives. He's the one using the car. And so then I go through this laundry list in my head and I say, just lock the car. I got really frustrated one day. And so we talked about what's it like. And I said, it feels like all of this responsibility is on me to close up the house and to keep it safe. And then I'm in this ball of anxiety inside. And it doesn't feel good for me, but I also know it doesn't feel good for you when we're both, ready to fall asleep. And I'm like, did you lock the car? And you have to go down to the kitchen and didn't you can't remember. And it's a frustrating dynamic. So instead what we did is let's talk about those 5 things that we need to do to close the house each night. Okay, check that things are locked. 2-minute tidy up so that when we wake up the living room is back into place. And this is what works for our family. I know it's not for everybody, but then also, what about the dishes? Is the coffee machine prepared? What helps us wake up and live smoothly? Closing the house, opening the house. Those are 2 easy conversations that you can have. It might also be about where things are placed to help you function throughout the day. But again, these are all conversations where we need to go in saying what systems are in place, how could we do this better? And also providing a benefit. There's a reason why you want to do this. There's a reason why I'm coming to you with this. It's so that our intimacy as a whole can feel good, because I don't want to be your mother. And it doesn't feel good to you when I'm stepping into a mother role, or when I feel like a nag, and that doesn't feel good, doesn't make us want to make out with each other or to have sex or to do all the fun things and laugh and play. But this is what we need to shift now, right? And so I think having those conversations from, again, if we think of that bottom up perspective, and the other thing here is being a team. How do you speak to your colleague? You are running the most important team in your own home. And yet, I imagine most people listening don't have those team meetings or weekly check ins with each other, because we forget to prioritize that part of us, which is one of the easiest things we can do for our relationships.
Yes, I actually will link in the show notes to your podcast episode about weekly meetings, because I know there's a lot there, and they are so powerful. And I love that you say that we have to be that team and have that plan in place. I mean, it makes sense, but I think society has fed us this idea that if we're with the right person, they'll just know. They'll just know how to meet our needs, and you're going to just work well together naturally towards the same values and the same goals. And it's like, well, no, like hopefully you get along with them. Like hopefully you do have generally the same values, but how you get to those values, how you all of that comes together actually has to take a lot of planning. That definitely has helped Aaron and me with this decluttering journey, is like sitting down, and it's not in the moment while I'm decluttering and then I come to him while he's cooking and say, what do you want me to do with this? You know, and instead it's
door handle conversations.
No, they don't work at all. Then he gets all defensive and worried or whatever. And instead of just like sitting down outside the moment, making a plan, how are we going to tackle the garage? You know, that's something we're doing this month. And it's like, okay, let's spend a couple $100s on a full day babysitter so we can do the garage together. And so that way he's not stressed. He knows it's coming. I know it's coming. So I'm not walking in the garage every day saying, when is he going to get to this? Right? Like there is a plan in place. And so that is such a practical piece of advice. And it leads perfect.
So this is for the person listening who says, I'm so busy to do this kind of thing. And I get it, because then when we go to sit down and have a meeting like this, it's like, oh, what did we want to talk about? Oh, I don't know. How are things going? Good. You? Good. So keep a note section on your phone. And what you can do is anytime there's something that annoys you or frustrates you, write it out in the note section. That way it's not coming out to your partner. And then at the end of the day, the end of the week, go back and revisit that note section. What's the theme in there? Find themes. Is it a need that you have that's not being met? Oh, I need more connection. That's what this is about. Go there and you can go to your partner with that. Is it about, okay, there's this kink in our system where I talk about closing the task with the mental load, where my partner does bath time and then leaves all the bath time toys and I'm there cleaning it up. We need a better system here. Let me write that in the notepad. Then when we come back to this meeting and we only have 10 minutes, I have a few succinct notes that I've thought about and reflected on, and now we can find a solution forward. It doesn't need to be big, but we tend to not put in those kind of early things that would help us make these meetings more effective, or even make running our families more effective.
Yes, it's brilliant, and it makes all the sense in the world. And so that's why it's actually a perfect segue too into you have a blog post that I just love, because give me anything with numbers and numerical, bullet points, and I can remember them, and I feel like I actually have a plan. And you have one that's 5 characteristics of a healthy relationship. And this is the mini series Paring Down Relationships. So obviously I wanted to talk about decluttering, but I also just want to do a quick pare down of like what actually matters in your relationship. And so many of these, actually probably all 5 of these points, will feed themselves nicely back into having these hard conversations, whether it's about decluttering or the mental load or anything, because like you said, it'll help identify and move out of those negative cycles, which are at the root of so much of our difficulties in our relationships. So if you're game, let's talk through each one.
Let's go.
So the first one you lay out of 5 characteristics of a healthy relationship is differentiation. Can you tell us what is differentiation?
Yeah, this is the ability to recognize that you and I are 2 separate people. We have our own thoughts, feelings, opinions, wishes, values, and mine are going to be different than yours. Essentially, I like to say it this way: I am me, you are you, and we are both okay. If you prefer to have tacos tonight and I want to have pizza, neither one of us is right or wrong. Now we need to negotiate and co create our experience such that, hey, this time we're going to have tacos and next time we'll have pizza so that we both communicate our needs. We're responsible for communicating what we want and need, and then for navigating how we can, and I like the sandbox analogy, how we can play in the sandbox together. Because what so many people do is they try to find what is right or wrong. And I think even as a generation, we're really moving out of this need to be right. We're trying to understand that there is no right or wrong in relationships and how you live your life and show up, that what you do might be different from someone else. What you as a couple does might be different from another couple. And that's okay. So, differentiation is this idea that we can view something differently, that we can both be autonomous. So, I have my own identity, I have my own desires and needs, and we're going to focus on building intimacy and connection. Going back to the sandbox analogy, many people step into this codependency, which is we're going to, if you're in my sandbox, then I can't tell you how I feel and I'm not going to share my feelings with you. And you're playing with cars. I guess I'm just going to play with cars too. And, okay, I guess that's how we're doing it. But then what's happened is now, especially with the uptake of social media and the use of pop psychology terms, I'm finding people swing really far into hyper independence. And independence sounds like this is my sandbox. I'm not going to tell you how I feel. Don't bring your shovel and buckets over here. We're only playing with cars. That is not a relationship. And so a relationship looks like, oh, you like buckets and shovels? Cool. You're going to build a castle? Awesome. I like my cars. And I'm going to use the cars to go around your castles and roads and we can go back and forth, right? As soon as you tell someone how something has to be, that is not a relationship.
Oh, that's so good because yes, like you said, you hear the word codependency all the time online, and um, it's it's challenging because people, like you said, the pendulum swing goes back the next direction. And so, is it really codependent to go grocery shopping with your partner? Like Aaron and I love to go grocery shopping together, and I've seen that before. Oh, those people are in such a codependent relationship; they can't even grocery shop by themselves. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait. This doesn't mean just like complete independence and you can't do anything with your partner. The point is recognizing that while you're
No.
at the grocery store together, if he wants to buy this kind of whatever and you want to buy that kind of whatever, you actually have the ability to respect one another and come up with a solution together. Like it's not just compromise, making one person compromising all the time so that the other person is running them over. um that's yeah.
Codependency is the loss of the I. And you can grocery shop and still be I, right? And let's clarify this too. Dependency is an innate biological need. We don't hold our children out like this. There, you're okay, right? I'm rocking you with my arms distant out. You hold them close. That's dependency. We still need to be held close. We still need to be soothed and felt secure and safe and comforted as adults. That is an innate need. So dependency is not bad. When we lose ourselves within the other, that's codependency. And while for some people that might work, we can maybe think of some popular relationships that might swing that way. It's never for us to judge from the outside. But a healthy relationship has two separate people that can find a way to build connection. So if you like to go grocery shopping together, go and do it together. We love to do it. We love to do Costco runs together. And with no kids, that's a bonus. But as soon as I say, oh, I really want those bags of whatever, and oh, he might be upset with me if I get them, then we're swinging into why don't I want to share my thoughts and feelings? You get to do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like when you're differentiated, it makes having those conversations, let's, talking about decluttering here, like we were saying earlier, you're able to ask those curious questions because they're a separate person from you. And when they get defensive, you don't take it personally. Like, I think that's a big piece of differentiation that has kind of clicked for me
Yes.
is that I'm not taking on their mood. I'm not taking on their reactions. I'm not taking on his
Right.
defensiveness because that's his experience. It doesn't have to be mine and influence mine. And that's tricky for sure.
Right. So my husband not getting rid of the CD player is not because he doesn't love me. It's not because he's trying to spite me. It's not anything attached to me. There's something else completely for himself. I'm not personalizing his approach to his closet or things like that, right? So, really, that depersonalization is so important. And when we think of the steps of differentiation, this is where I'm going to plug my book. Grab my book. I didn't sign up for this because I really do teach this to you through the different case studies in the book and also through my own story in there. But it is about being able to have awareness first of what you're thinking and feeling, and then being able to be grounded and regulated, and then practicing that ability to communicate with another person.
Yes. Oh, it's so key. Okay, so that was number one is differentiation. I'm going to read out loud numbers 2 through 5 for the sake of time. And maybe we can just kind of pick which one, or if a thought comes to mind that you want to share. Okay, so number one
Mhm.
for a healthy relationship is differentiation. Number two is to create boundaries. Number three is prioritizing repair. Number four is setting expectations. And number five is acknowledging bids for connection. So, what do you think? And I'm coming up with a question on the fly, Dr. Tracy, because
I love them.
I want to talk to you for 3 years. And we can't. And so all my questions, like we talked about at the beginning, we knew I had too many. But what am I supposed to do when I'm talking to you and you can like solve all my life problems is what it feels like. So they're all here on the page.
We do again. We come again and we come back to it. We do a whole boundary episode.
Exactly.
But okay, so let's think of these. So they're really big pieces. And I like to remind people that you don't get to, so I think this is actually a great parallel between what I do and what you do. You don't get to do the entire overhaul in one day. So if you are looking to tackle parts in your relationship, it is not a, okay, great. Dr. Tracy said boundaries, repairing, set my right. We need to find one small thing. So already at this point, listening, what is one thing so far that stands out for you that you could work on in your relationship and in your paring down journey? That would be something so important. And when it comes to just keeping the health of our relationship, I think one of the most important things we can remind ourselves is the small things every single day. And those small things build up. And actually, that's an interesting parallel too. If we kind of think of like, if I were to hold on to this wrapper from this really delicious chocolate from my dear friend that gave it to me, and then I have like 100 of these and how they build up over time in the pile of the drawer, right? But think of that like your relationship. These are the drops each day, these micro moments that build a deeper sense of connection and getting to know each other. And so something so simple can be like turning towards each other as soon as you first wake up. I imagine that's what you did when you were dating. And now the kids maybe grab your attention, the alarm, the to-do list, the phone. Pause when you wake up, spend 10 minutes together. That is one of the easiest things you can do. If your partner's not awake yet, pour them coffee and bring that to them, or greet each other at the door. That's the bids for connection. That is the anytime your partner says, "Oh, I think it's going to snow today," you don't just go, or, "Oh, there you go," like an old person talking about the weather again. You say, "Yeah, what are you thinking about when you're talking about the weather?" That is you turning towards them. And these micro moments says to your partner, I see you, you matter to me, I am interested in you, and I want to know you. And that is one of the easiest things that we can do to help pare down what we need to do in our relationships. It's not about the flowers. It's not about all of the meetings and big getaways. It's those moment to moment interactions that matter the most.
That connection's perfect. It's such a good way to remember it. Be like, okay, what did Dr. Tracy say on Shannon's podcast? Okay, so we're talking about piles, piling up the stuff that becomes clutter, and we're talking about piles. What is piling up in our relationship? Those little things. That's huge. And I think not doing those things is why we start feeling like roommates rather than lovers and partners. And so something that you're offering, I think it starts tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, is the More Than Roommates Challenge. Can you please tell everyone what that's all about? And I'm going to have a link to it because everyone needs to sign up.
It is one of my most fun challenges that I have offered. And it is 10 days with one simple action that shows up in your email box for the next 10 days. and you will have a mindset shift or a small take action, and you'll have a communication script. So it's just robust, but I love it. And the part that I love about it the most is actually hearing from everybody and how impactful this is that people start to feel closer by these small things that you can do. So for the next 10 days, you're joining me to shift from roommates back into lovers, and you can join me. It's on my website and you'll have the link there. So I hope that you will join me.
Yes. My favorite thing that you say about this is that it's not a challenge to kiss your partner. It's a challenge to make you want to kiss your partner. Oh,
Yes.
that's so good. That's so good, because I think of when we think of like relationship challenges, we're like, oh, like, okay, kiss for 4 seconds, like, and that's
Right.
not what this is.
Right. But if I don't like you right now, I don't want to kiss you for 6
Like,
seconds.
if we're feeling like roommates, that's probably like not our starting point,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I want to ask you also the final questions that I ask all my guests. So, what is something that you are currently paring down?
So I actually just completed it thanks to your podcast. I completed our cantina, our cold cellar. I had alcohol bottles in there from 2008. Shannon, I am not doing polar bear shots anymore. I don't even know when this alcohol was last opened. So I ended up getting rid of several bottles that we took home from destination trips. So bottles of rum from Dominican or Cuba, gave those away and just got rid of the other ones that were opened. And it feels so good. I rearranged the cold cellar. My husband was in the middle of it, was like, you choose the most interesting times to do this decluttering thing. And then afterwards, he had said, wow, this is so accessible. And it is, it's great. It's lovely. So I did that. I also got rid of, thanks to your inspiration, a yearbook that didn't feel good for me. That was a really hard one because I had this belief that I should hold on to every single yearbook and every image and memory. And then I've been getting rid of some old clothes as well. So it's a work in progress and it's just feeling so good.
Good for you. Yeah, I remember talking about the yearbook in my sentimental items episode. That's an interesting one for sure. So I'm glad you got to tackle that. Also, just wanted to laugh that he said it's an interesting timing, because I do feel like if I'm starting to declutter, there's something else going on with me too. It's actually a great opportunity to figure out what's going on with your partner. If you see them cleaning and decluttering, then they're trying to work through something internally, or they have a need for calm, or they have some sort of something going on. So that's probably why it feels so random to our partners. Okay. And what is something that you are looking forward to right now?
Oh my goodness. I'm working on my second book and I can't wait. And I'll leave it at that, but it's going to be so good and it's so needed. And I'm so excited for people to have this resource.
Me too, because your first book is amazing. I didn't sign up for this, which is also going to be linked. I'm going to have all the links because Tracy has all of the resources in there. So, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for that second book. And to kind of sum up, where can everyone find you online to follow along and get all your resources?
My favorite part of being on podcasts is when listeners come into my DMs after and let me know what stood out for them. So join me over. I hang out on Instagram, Dr. Tracy D, or any social as Dr. Tracy D, or go to my website, check out my resources, send me an email.
Yeah, your blog is great. Your podcast is great. Your online program is great. Your book is great. I mean, it's all great, and it'll all be linked, including that, by the way, everyone, the 5 characteristics of a healthy relationship. Since I know we kind of moved through the last 4 quickly, I'm going to have that blog linked as well. So I'm going to have to listen back to this episode and remember all the things I promised to link, because there are a lot of them. Anyways, Tracy, thank you so much for being here today. I am just so grateful we had this conversation. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you to everyone who joined us and listened in.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face, so thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at Paring Down Podcast, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.